until about 11 this morning, I thought I was going to have the honor of saying, ladies and gentlemen, Iggy Pop. But this is even better, because I get to say, ladies and gentlemen, the band you love to love and never thought you'd see again, Iggy Pop, Ron Ashton, Scott Ashton, the Stooges. You have no idea how huge that is. Cool. I want to start by asking you to tell a story which you related to me in very colorful, glorious detail a couple of weeks ago about a show that the band played in, I believe it was 1970, at the World's Fair Pavilion, opening for Joe Cocker. And I mean, an interaction you had with a guy named Frank Barcelona, who was a very famous talent agent in New York at the time.
Sure. All right. I think the first time this group got out of the Midwest, we somehow got a gig at the World's Fair Pavilion, beautiful outdoor pavilion in Queens. And we were going to be down on the bill, opening for Joe Cocker. I think because we had a record out, somebody at our label forced them to take us. And, you know, at the time, we would play 3 or 4 songs, very basic, each one as long as we felt like. Ron would riff, and I wore these little, tiny little Levi shorts, like chicks wear a lot now, on vacation.
Hot pants.
Yeah, hot pants, and a little pair of moccasins. I always thought moccasins were cool. The crowd was not going wild for us. and it started making me nervous. And, you know, I don't know why. I started playing with one of Scott's broken drumsticks, and I was kind of making little marks on my flesh. Little bits of blood were coming out. People were just looking at us. I started getting sick of the lack of interview, so I jumped them. You know, I did a stage dive and jumped the audience, and we finished our set. And we had a long-suffering manager who was really in the health food hippie, who ended up working for Erewhon Foods and Whole Foods, and named Jimmy Silver. And he said, "Okay," he said, I want to take you now. I want to take you to meet a really important guy who could help the group, the big booking agent, Frank Barcelona." So I said, okay, you know, and I walked out in my little outfit with my little flecks of blood in the middle of right through the audience. And there he was standing there. He was beautiful. He had that Goodfellas look. He had a beautiful silvery coiffed do, a still handsome face, permatan, nice big paunch, Rolex, Banlon shirt, yachting shoes. and he stood there and he said, "Jimmy, Iggy, I'm going to pass on the group. I can't help you. But I think in 25 years, it's going to be important." So
and
you know,
he was right.
He was a pro, you know. So especially some of these old school dudes who came from the pinball industry or things like that. They have a way. They had a way of looking at things and sizing it up. So,
but isn't that like a weird kind of justice? It's sort of the reverse. You know, most people say, well, buy now, pay later. This is like, well, why don't you pay really a lot now, and maybe you'll get a big reward in about 25 years if you're still here to enjoy it.
Yeah.
Beefsteak mine.
Nobody really knew where to put us when we started. So, I mean, what were we doing on a bill with Joe Cocker? We loved Joe. In the ideal world, in the macrocosmic universe, I'll bet Joe did like. I bet he might have liked us. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe not.
But to people who compartmentalize things, you know, Joe Cocker does sensitive white he's a white Negro. Yeah. he's a white Negro.
English white.
What?
An English white.
An English white, the classic English white Negro. That's okay, but it wasn't okay to be in the Stooges. You know, so.
Yeah. But all of you, you know, whether it was instrumentally, what you were doing, singing, the theatrics, you were all extreme from the start. That started literally from the very first gig. Do you think that either musically or physically you've been as aggressive to audiences and even towards yourselves as you were if the Stooges had been successful right from Jump Street?
I think it's still plenty progressive. I mean, aggressive and progressive.
Both.
Yeah. And, but I don't know, you're saying if there hadn't.
Yeah, but if you'd had the big reward,
If we'd
you'd
had
the
more
hit
support
single.
from a wider public, what would have happened to our sound? Would we have still been as edgy?
That's tough to say.
Yeah, it's hard to say.
I don't think so.
I don't think so, yeah, I was gonna say, give me the money, honey. It can't hurt. I mean,
Give me the money and then I'll
and
still be as
we would be the
intense.
same, that wouldn't have changed.
You know,
No one
there,
can do that.
there were probably 20 estimable groups in southeastern Michigan, where we come from, in the 60s, at the time we were playing. Many of them are still around now. You'd know them, many of their songs you'd know. And pretty much the ones that had, there's a song called "Smoking in the Boys' Room." Everybody knows the Motley Crue cover, but that was written by contemporaries of ours.
I know Cubs.
And honestly, once you get that hit and you go out and start generating money for someone else, not for yourself, because you're not going to get it, especially when you're young, then you hook into the machine and it becomes work a day,
You're
and
on
you go
IB.
out and do and I think that stopped certain people. I saw it artistically. I think it absolutely murdered Alice Cooper, who came to Detroit as we sing about flowers and spiders band from the West Coast, saw what we were doing as a group, saw what people in Detroit were doing, codified that, made a great series a very short series of really good records, commercial but rock and roll, and then there was a little money. Alice has a very sharp manager, a guy named Shep Gordon, who's done well in film, and they just got together and figured out, cut out the group, okay, get some professional songwriters, get some professional musicians,
And he was put by
Kaboom.
1976, he was playing golf with George Burns.
Yeah, so it didn't help creatively. He lost the edge. He had hits, but I'm 18 and Under My Wheels are these are fine art. And in the sense that a Van Gogh or a Monet is of value now, these will be of value for a long time, but not billion-dollar babies, or I want to be elected. It's different.
But at what point, was there a point where your reaction on stage, that aggression, was a reaction to a lack of respect? The fact that, it was your fuck you to critics and executives who were saying things like, well, fuck the Stooges, they're morons. They're not smart. This is not, I've got a review, actually, from the magazine I work for. I wasn't there at the time. Now, they're talking about like great records in heavy metal, and this was done, I think, in the late 70s or late 70s, early 80s. It says they're talking about Funhouse. The Stooges perfected moronic metal, stripped to its most elementary components and elevated to the level of aesthetic nihilism. Spurred on, that's a great comment. Spurred on by Iggy Pop's bestial growls and onstage antics, the band stumbled through some of the dumbest, most abusive rock ever waxed. This is a positive review.
We would get together and we were presented with all the reviews and magazines. We loved it. Negative was funny.
Yeah.
We laughed. I never got upset. I thought even bad reviews are better, because more people will come and see the Elephant Man or the Circus Freak. Let's see what this is all about. It never bothered me. I was young enough not to really care, and we were living in the day and enjoying our day and enjoying playing music. So,
But you knew you weren't dumb. You knew you weren't moronic. Those are pejoratives.
I had a problem with it. What passes for intelligent generally isn't. Period. In life. That's generally, that's the way it is for me, What do you think about that, Scott?
What was the question?
The idea. Yeah.
You guys are actually playing an in-store at Waterloo today, which will be quite theatrical in itself. What were the kind of promotional ideas that Elektra had for you guys in 1969? Like, how do you sell the Stooges to young America in 1969?
Well, they
Well,
did,
yeah, we know they didn't, but did they actually have a plan?
they did a couple of, they sent me, there was something called 16 magazine, and it was run by a very horny lady. They sent me to have tea in her apartment and see if we hit it off. And I was on the cover.
So the tea was really good,
No,
right?
no, it was, but it, you know, it was professionalism only. So they tried, they couldn't figure out. And then another thing they would do, they made some money with the Doors. So they would take our records and put out the album and then say, okay, you boys, we're gonna make a special single mix. And then they just bring in real session musicians and have them play Doors licks over our records with a, you know, with a little
Keyboard.
snarky organ.
Well,
and
actually, if you
everything.
find the single of Down on the Street
Right.
from Funhouse, there is an additional organ overdub that apparently was not there when you...
No, and didn't know about it until 30 years later.
They weren't sure what to do, and it was really just, we just sort of got in, we just sort of walked in the door when nobody was looking, really. They were, what happens is, you know, the guy who ran that company, Jack Holtzman, he had what would be called now an indie record store. He had a cool folk-oriented record store in the Village. He was a sharp little guy, you know, and he put some money behind Judy Collins, who sang beautifully and made palatable folk music, made him a ton of money, and then everything he did turned to gold. The Love hit, which was incredibly good, the Doors. Suddenly this dude had more money than he knew what to do with. He bought space in what is now the Trump Tower on Columbus Circle, yeah. And they just needed to do something.
Tax
So,
write-off.
yeah, they send out, what they do, they send out scouts, and they say, where is the culture happening? Where, and they want to co-opt a whole scene, because it's the same as it is now. They don't really know which group is going to hit. So they just throw all the pasta at the wall, you know, till, you know how you throw
See
the
what
pasta
sticks.
at the wall, and when it's done, it'll stick, you know. So we just came in with the MC5. They just said, okay, Danny Fields, one guy liked us,
Yeah.
you know. But,
Well, did you have any promo ideas?
you know, I mean, I don't know about Ron.
No. If you talk to those people, it's like talking to somebody on the moon or something.
You
They
know-
had their own agenda. We were just kids.
You know, all
And our
we
idea
ever-
was
But you
staying
also,
away.
you were
Staying
fans
away.
of bands, and you knew about the Who and the Stones. And the
We
Doors and all
didn't,
this
we
stuff.
thought they were nicer than they really were.
Yes, that's
Yes,
true.
we
No,
thought
it's
they
true.
were just cool guys
Yeah.
who were obsessed with sounding cool and dressing cool and being really like shitty, you know? You know what I mean? And that when you're like that, well, life is just cool and you're like a god. Honestly, and somehow there's some, you're rich too or something. But we didn't really understand, I didn't understand the difference between $5 and $5,000 even. I didn't really,
We had $5.
we had $5, yeah.
So your decimal point was on the wrong end of the
Yeah,
zeros.
there you
right?
go. So we were just really, we became artists by default because we had nothing, we weren't thinking about anything else. We were just thinking like, listen to that, listen to what Ravi Shankar's doing, and you could apply that to a big rock guitar, and that would be cool.
Yeah.
And a lot of people tried to work really hard to synthesize those things in the 60s, but all he did was really, he just opened up his strings and he listened. Because it was there in the machine. Just like good songs are in the air.
Speaking of songs, the 12 tracks on the Weirdness plus the ones that y'all did together
Yeah.
on Skull Ring actually double the entire original Stooges
I
song.
know. Yeah,
That's
well,
what
we
Iggy said.
actually,
We've got a lot of songs now.
yeah, we recorded,
It's the two figures.
there's
now.
16 for the Weirdness. We actually doubled the session. We felt we had to do that because of the contemporary tuna melt standard of music.
Special, Belgian
Yeah,
B-sides.
but we tried to, I mean, at least this was my idea, was to try to keep it short enough. So if you've made other records back in the day when it was LPs and then you had a little break like we have, then, then the new one will be compared, and you don't want to mess with that, the real comparison, but you can put it in a similar glass so that somebody can say, oh, I get it, under 40 minutes, under 40 minutes, under 40 minutes, under 40 minutes.
40 ounces.
And they can, instead of comparing 72 minutes or well, don't get me started, some guy who just, all he wants to do is pound on his guitar and pound on you, and there's nothing to say, and so he needs to do it 16 times for 72 minutes on this horrible little ugly CD thing.
5-inch beer cups.
Yeah, yeah, so I can't stand it.
But what is it that takes so long to write a Stooges song? Not because of the 35 years, but when we talked earlier, you were talking about the process by which a lot of the original songs were written at the Funhouse in Ann Arbor, and how Ron would come up with like the riff to No Fun, or you had that rhythm from the Belly Dance record that became 1969.
Yes.
But you also mentioned that it then took a while for it to get into song form.
Yes.
Why did it take so long to come from the riff?
Let those guys
To the
say
thing.
something first.
Yeah.
Most of the time we played back then, it was on mark and set go. We didn't know where the music was going, what was going to happen, or where it was going to end. It was, and then after you did that enough times, you could pick out something to try to put together a song.
When
You
you
would call it a song.
But when you started with a riff, like for No Fun, where does this go? The riff is quite cool because it's basically one chord
Huh?
with that little sort of up, that
Yeah.
up kick. in
You
the
play
middle.
it long enough, something comes along that fits.
Yeah, and in that case, first of all, I think the theme behind it is that it's really easy to write hundreds of kind of really crappy or okay songs. And it's really hard not to. And that's, unfortunately, for people that really love music, all your great heroes, they all write a lot. Even the best ones write a bunch of shit that's no good. It's no good.
So you just
And
got away from the process of writing shit and concentrated on
we
what was
tried really, I think we all had a very
Everyone
good,
else thought it was shit.
yeah, and so, for me, for No Fun, I'll answer you, the process was he had that great riff, and the way I remember this, you may remember, I have an impaired, yeah, the way I remember it is this, he had the riff, what we would do, we were a living band, we were communists, we lived together, we cooked weird macrobiotic concoctions together, took the same drugs, we were with the same girls, and not at the same time. And he would play this riff back and forth, and right away I knew, that's a good one. That is a fucking, sorry, but that's like, we weren't recorded yet at the time, and I heard that, I said, now with that stuff, we're in the book. I knew it, right off, and it's funny, I'm gonna jump aside. Years later, I made a film with Tom Waits and Jim Jarmusch, and Jarmusch started playing No Fun on a guitar, and Tom said, hey, that's a good one. You got a good one there, Jim.
Hold that.
Yeah, hold that one. It's one of his, actually, But so he had that, and we would go out and try it out. We were actually playing a lot of church socials. We were playing the basement of the Methodist Church, the basement of the
They let us play.
United Way, the
Yeah, it's
Unitarians.
weird.
They let us play, and I'd try out different things. Somewhere along the line, I got the idea no fun, because I wanted to have fun, and also because the word no is a great word, and it in satisfaction, that's my favorite part, is when it just goes no, no, no. That's the best part. And in the Beach Boys, another very important group, they had fun, fun, fun all the time. So there's a, you got a foot in the door. You got a
Combine
lyric.
the Stones and the Beach Boys.
Yes.
Perfect formula.
Yes, and then the idea for the construction is from, it's I Walk the Line. I was listening to I Walk the Line a lot, and said to him, well, why don't we make it so it could go, put an E in there? And he put the E in there, and then little by little how about a bridge? And he went to an E bridge, and then you start to fill in. It should be things that really, I mean, I couldn't sing, my mother's passed away, it was a beautiful person, but anyway, the person I am now, I couldn't get away with singing about calling my mom on the phone. But that's part of real experience when you're a young blade and you're gonna go out and like act cool and be in a group and be an artiste. All of them, I don't care who they are, they send their laundry home, you know, they hit up their mother for $10, you know, so
We did.
that's how I think about this stuff.
Yeah. Well, how would you compare that process to say something like ATM on the weirdness, or
It's a
Free and
little
Freaky?
different this time.
Similar.
It's similar, but a little more advanced. We got together, but this time we were in close proximity of each other. It wasn't like he's up in the attic with a girl and can hear filtering through the house by playing. And then go, hey, wait a minute, and then come down and say something. It was similar, but it was quicker.
We
And
free
just
up
play,
all
play,
at
play,
once.
play, 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 play. And I would just get there, plug in. I'd walk in the door, go to the amplifier, get my guitar out, plug in, just start playing. Whatever comes off the top of my head, freeform. He goes, hey, I like that, why don't you play that a little bit longer? And then, okay, like that, add something to, some lyrics to it. He goes, hey, while you're working on that, come up with a bridge or another piece to go with it. So we actually just accelerated that process of the past by condensing our little area, our space.
But was it easy to fall back
Oh, it
into
was
that
easy.
after
Oh, I loved it.
35 years?
It was easy. For me, it was easy.
Do you disagree?
I agree, except it wasn't as, it took like, I'd say back in the day, maybe half of them would be really good off the bat. And then when we started this process, maybe a lesser percentage would be good. Or not that they weren't good, but they weren't. We would try in all sorts of things because you've got like, we actually did a country song. Yeah, and I you know, it
I
sounds
just
good.
started playing it. 'cause
Yeah,
it
things
felt
we
that it
used
was
to
fun.
do. Because
Yeah.
he can play country now, and I could sing a little bit of that stuff, so we tried some other things. So, but it was there. It was there from the get-go. A lot of it's down to the drums. Because he plays parts. He plays songs on the drums, like more like an African or a Middle Eastern, or like a good Memphis drummer. It's not, usually what you get is some guy with these awful muscles, and they're, especially now, and they're going like this, and they're playing the drums to a song. But our songs either stand or fall on his beats.
Was
So-
1969 Rhythm your idea?
Yeah, that's him. He played that.
Yeah,
Yeah, he wrote that.
inspired by Bo Diddley, yeah.
Yeah, but it's based on, you know, the music we listened to, and I taught him 3 beats when he wanted to.
Some triplets,
Yeah, yeah.
triplets, 1, 2, 3, 1,
But
2,
no,
3, 1,
he
2,
writes his own shit.
That's okay. You're amongst
Okay,
friends.
yeah, I know.
Um,
It's a horrible habit.
Well, the weirdness was recorded live in the studio, you know, pretty much all of it, vocals, the whole business. And yet there are, even on the first couple of records, which are considered to be primal masterpieces, there's actually a lot of interesting production touches. Like, whose idea was the sleigh bells on I Want to Be Your Dog? It's like Christmas. What?
He had a bunch of percussion. He rummaged through, found stuff.
Yeah, but Pharoah Sanders,
Yeah.
there's a great horn, check him out if it's his first albums, his old albums, one of the great unsung American musicians, a black fella named Pharoah Sanders who never really got, but he's spellbinding, wonderful lyrical player. He had some on a particular cut.
I love that.
Yeah, Upper and Lower Egypt, I think was the cut, yeah. So I was tuned into that stuff. But and the piano on that, that's my idea too. And the reason for that is it totally will change. Look, it's like can you picture, okay, this is a corny example. Picture the Mona Lisa. If behind her there was like a condo tower. It's not the same picture. Depends on the space, depends on what's around the main subject. And the main subject in that is his guitar and the overtones it makes, but the frequency of where that piano is plays against his guitar, and the frequency of the sleigh bells play with his drums.
Yeah.
And it suddenly, it's different.
Well, it's got that intense hammering effect, but it's
And
got
also
this weird,
that, yeah.
but it's got this weird Christmas vibe to it.
Yeah,
as well,
I know.
which is not expected.
They're nice instruments, those.
Well, whose idea were the hand claps in No Fun? Because that actually really agitates the rhythm.
I'm an amateur producer. I do a little production.
On the side.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because hand clapping is actually a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
And it's also hard to place properly. You can't just hand clap on every song.
A lot of my favorite
Yeah,
records.
it's a real thing. I mean, it's serious business.
Early rock and rockabilly.
Yeah, really.
Those, the out of the Appalachian folk music, when they want to start pushing a beat a little, a lot of hand clapping.
Yeah.
Sounds great. It's down to earth.
You won't hear it on like Hey Jude by the Beatles. Like, Hey Jude.
It changes the song quite a bit, actually.
I wonder if they have hand clapping.
So how much control did you actually feel as a band you had over your music on, well, just start with the first record. Because, there's the story about the John Cale doing original mixes, which then you objected to because they were a little too arty.
Well, I think what a lot of people don't realize is that we were a totally different band before the first album. Totally. We didn't play songs, we played idea, we played music. And it wasn't until they wanted us to do an album that there was no fun, it would be your dog, not right. But
We were experimental, weren't we?
that wasn't us.
And we became rockist, to use
And it was a great line that Jack Holtzman goes, "You do have songs, don't you?" "Oh, yes, plenty of songs."
Which in fact you didn't, because then you had to go back to the hotel and write 3.
Well, even before
that, and that's when we really started.
Yeah.
It's real. Look, I mean, when we first really started trying to play music, I mean, I'll be honest, I was sitting on a floor, I had little love beads, a little Hindu mustache, and I was playing an organ, little rock operas about a guy who lived with a little mouse and in a bucolic world, and these guys were trying to back me up. Nobody wanted to listen to that. And I looked around. Yeah, a little bit of it. I looked around, I looked at what they wanted, and said, okay, you want that? Okay. There's a little bit of nerd's revenge in there, a little bit of, little bit. And you do get changed by the audience and then by the industry. And then what I remember, whenever we made records, we were always told from the beginning, basically in the nicest way, what you're doing is shit. You're no fucking good. You don't know what you're fucking doing. Listen to us and we'll change you and you'll have a chance to have a sandwich. And basically, these guys would evade that, and I would go have a verbal, I'd fight it. I'd be the one, I'd go sit in the boardroom with some guy and, you know, talk it out and say anything, get the thing out the way we wanted it. That's the way, that's my version.
Well,
Is that
and the
accurate?
first record we did have, we walked in a tiny studio, and there's my Marshall stack, there's the bass Marshall stack, and how I played, it's on 10. Turn it on, start playing, and John Keel goes, you can't do that, that's not how you record. In the studio, this place, there's leakage. There's leakage, what have you done?
Apparently he learned this doing the first Velvet Underground record.
So we had a sit-down strike. So we literally went into the vocal booth, lit some candles, little incense, broke out the old hash pipe, until we came to a compromise. Jim Hale would come in, and finally there was talk. So the compromise was 9. And that's how it worked. We just sort of set our precedents, and it worked out well. Then we came to an understanding, and things worked well. That's for number one. Number two was a record was totally different. We had grown up ourselves, and it was easier. And I liked the idea of it was my first time ever in the studio, the very first record. So it was a little bit intimidating. But that's what made it fun too, because I always like to be a little bit nervous, and a little bit of the unknown brings out a part of you that you don't even know that's in you. You see a side of yourself that you've never seen before. And I really like that when that happens.
It's boring to have your own way. It really is. We were lucky that we came up in times because nobody knew what to do with us. We were always in a weird situation. So, you know, the first record, there's Times Square used to be very seedy, not what it is now. It used to be like a cheap carnival, pimps all over the street. And that first record was made on a little tiny walk-up over a peep show. That was what it was, a peep show. And then he walked up a little flight of little crappy stairs, wooden stairs. It was a tiny little room with tiny little amps to make this tiny little R&B music. Pretty Purdy's drum kit was set up there, and Garnett Mims had a hit, Cry Baby.
Yeah.
And they told us, and then, you know, our producer is John Cale. He looks like the antagonist from Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. He's wearing a Christopher Lee-style Dracula cape, and he brings Nico to the sessions, who sits there and knits. And it creates an atmosphere. And we, you know, in that sense, we were lucky. The second record we made, Funhouse, in Los Angeles, Charles Manson had just done what he did, and we stayed at a place called the Tropicana Motel. On Sunset Boulevard, a famous old rock hotel.
Doors offices were there also, yes.
And the inhabitants were ourselves, Andy Warhol, Paul Morrissey, the entire cast of something called Heat, which was the latest Warhol insane movie. And then right next to me, Ed Sanders of the Village Fugs was writing the book The Family, about the Mansons, and scowling at me and saying, "You don't even know what that dog collar means, do you?" I went to the Bowser Boutique, and I saw this dog collar, and I thought that would look cool on me.
Man.
Yeah, you know, yeah. You know, I didn't buy them in fashion places, so there was a lot of atmosphere.